I can't hear you. You're muted.
Come in and go. That's when my long and enduring relationship with mental health really began.
This is great.
I can tell.
You love using heart disease, diabetes as analogies because it is
Right.
easy to
This
understand.
fear is yet another one that we don't acknowledge.
Parallels to what sounds to me like disability. Do you feel like it
It
would be
is.
damn right, girl?
I'm Binaifer Jesia, and I have had the best time ever.
Hey, it's been forever. How are you,
It's
Binaifer?
been really, really, really long. I cannot even remember when we last touched base. I do remember coming to one of your gigs at Not Just Jazz.
Oh, so my gigs. Okay, so people who are watching this right now are going to imagine that you saw me recently at one of my comedy gigs, but you're talking about the
No,
gig.
no, no, no. I'm talking about where you sang. Yeah,
Wow.
I
Yeah,
still remember your band.
yeah. I miss Jazz by the Bay.
I know, it's so sad. It's really so
Can you
sad.
imagine though it used to be Jazz by the Bay, became not just Jazz by the
Just
Bay, now
Jazz,
it's
by the way.
Pizza by the Bay, because screw
Pizza,
Jazz.
by the way. Yeah, but now it's all completely. It's not even pizza, by the way. I don't
Oh,
even know what it is anymore. It's pretty
I
mixed up.
haven't been there
So
for
in
years.
terms of spirit and essence, I don't think so. But anyway,
Thank you so much for agreeing to be here. You will get to listen to these sounds from time to time.
which is nice. I like that.
I'm not talking
Makes
about
me
the
feel.
birds, Binaifa. I'm talking
Then
about some
what
fucking
about?
construction sounds happening on the side.
Oh, I can't hear that.
This is great.
I can't hear.
From time to time, there will also be Charlie Brown barking. Charlie Brown is my dog, and he gets quite.
Hello, Charlie Brown. Well, I thought actually what happens is my cat, she wants to know who I'm talking to whenever I'm here in this spot. She'll come in and she'll go, and she'll crawl all over everything. And then once she approves, then she'll settle down somewhere there. And,
Oh,
yeah.
it seems like
But today
I come
she's just
pre-approved.
like,
Seems like, and so do you actually.
no. Today she's just basically not interested. I think it's
Oh,
become
that
old
makes me
for
feel
her
much
now.
better.
Yeah. So
No,
tell
so
me a little bit about what you've been up to and what have you been doing?
what I've been up to is mostly work, like me from a while ago where I used to sing, and now also of course I sing
So
because
tell me, when was that? What year are we talking about? Are we talking about
wow,
what, 2006, 7,
that was
8?
no, it was before I went to study, so was before 2005 even.
Wow. My
15
God,
years.
I bet. Yeah, really. My God.
Crazy.
And look at how we've all circled back and sort of are reconnecting. Isn't that neat? I
I
like
think it
that.
is really
Yeah.
awesome, actually. It is
Mm.
really cool. And this is the one thing that I've kind of seen happen, like the more the older I have grown, the more I've recognized that some of my older, maybe not closest friendships or anything necessarily, but I'm recognizing that even acquaintances, that
I guess connections is what
yeah,
you're talking
that
about.
there is
Yeah.
some kind of so yes, that's exactly right. So the connection, so acquaintances with whom you have hit it off, and that
Hmm.
to me speaks to the human connection on some level, and so you and I have not
Hmm.
really been in touch, and I'm actually just the
Oh,
lockdown has
yeah.
given us some more time. I think I've been reconnecting with a lot of people from before. For a lot of
Right.
people, I understand this is
Right.
not true for you, Binaifer.
Flashback to our telephone conversation. We was
Yes,
like,
I
time,
know.
really?
I know.
No, but
Yeah.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I am
So
not talking about me either. Just like people have been finding the time
there
to,
has
to,
been,
to
I
reach
think
out
it's
and be
time is not really, the word. Perhaps there's just been I think there's been a space of some sort where people are sort of looking.
yeah. I
I
think
don't
you're
know.
really right.
I think maybe, I don't know if it's the cliche that's caught on that, the lockdown is time to sort of kick back and reconnect with everything that's gone by. Maybe it's just that, or maybe it's actually happening. Who knows?
Yeah, no, I mean, and now that you say this, I do agree. It's not just time, no, because that just seems like such a, not that time is
Yeah.
trivial, but it's like, oh, I don't have the time for you, kind of, it's almost like so
Mm,
dismissive of another person, which is not what has been happening really. But I think there
mm,
has been a reshifting in a sense,
yeah.
of what is really most meaningful. I think it has
It's a
the
different
virus and the
space.
pandemic,
It's a
huh?
different sort of space. It's a different world space.
Yeah,
It's like our immediate environment has changed
right,
because the world is
correct.
changed. I don't know for how long though. I mean, I'm seeing some definite signs of everything coming smack back to the same old
I
painful
love that you
patterns.
have faith in
But
human resilience. We will get right back.
yeah, yeah, sometimes it's too much of a good thing. You don't want that much resilience. You do want some things to shift and change and sustain, but
think people
I don't
get,
know if that's going
like
to
when we
happen.
think about the pendulum swinging, sometimes we'll eventually get to some place in the middle, which is probably healthier. And we'll see.
Let's hope.
Yes.
Let's
No.
hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So,
you were saying that you've basically been doing a lot. It's all been work for you. So the your comedy gigs, and what else is work for you?
so
You did
genetic
mention
counseling.
something else.
Yeah, genetic counseling.
Right.
Yeah, so
So
it's
tell me a little bit about that, if you can. I mean, it's just really interesting. I mean, I would just like to
whose
know
show
what
is
it
this, huh? Whose show is this, huh?
Come on. I thought it was ours.
Okay, fine. A good use of manipulative
Okay.
strategies over there. No, no,
No. You can hit me with a few questions in a bit. Just tell me a little
no.
bit about this.
I don't need to deflect this. I'm just not wanting to talk about it, mostly because, as you can imagine, I have talked to other people as well. I am really concerned now. Like, most of
Right.
this show about me inviting these awesome people is Pooja talking about her being a genetic counselor. Genetic counseling, no, Binaifer, it's mostly it's medical genetics and
Hmm.
psychological counseling. So I see patients who have had any reason to
Hmm.
interface with genetics or DNA related stuff, and this
Hmm.
could fall into
Hmm.
three buckets, if you will. So
Hmm.
prenatally, obviously, there are blood tests, ultrasounds, and things that might pick up risks to the pregnancy. And as you can imagine, it is medically complex, and you of course understand how distressful that can be to anyone in that situation.
Hmm.
So to be able to explain not just the more jargony kind of what implications does this have, is it an isolated finding, is it just an
Right.
incidental finding that is anyways transient and normal part of fetal development, because a lot of times
Right.
things are, is there a way for us to clarify what this is
Right.
through more diagnostic testing. Unfortunately, with diagnostic testing in the prenatal setting, it can come with risks of miscarriage to the pregnancy.
Right.
They're going
Right.
into this pretty sacred space in a sense, and so then to help couples, just to facilitate that decision, like, is this
Decision.
something
Right.
you want
Right.
to do for
Right.
yourself, and what are you going to do with the results, even because if it
The
comes back
information.
normal,
Right.
great. We all hope for things to be okay, but there is a chance that we come back with information that is
Right.
not good news
Yes.
necessarily. And
Yes.
what
Yes.
are you going to do if your results came back like this, or how do you think
Right.
you might feel if it came back positive for something, and what might you
Understand.
do with
Yeah.
those
Got
results,
it.
because
Yeah.
these are heavy duty decisions, and permanent and irreversible, no? So finally we're having a discussion about pregnancy management, which is just euphemism for continuation versus termination. And no one really feels
Right.
comfortable having that conversation. Our doctors currently
Right.
are not trained in, forget
Oh God.
psychology,
Yes.
sometimes even bedside
Absolutely.
manner,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it would be such a disservice to an individual to provide medical services that don't address this very important thing about what was your vision for family. What do you think the burden of this is for you, financially, physically, emotionally? Do you think this is something you want to do, you don't want to do, you can
Right.
take up, you can't take up, without being like, oh, you're a horrible human being for this, or so very non-judgmental, very client-centric, um, helping people understand the medical, familial, as well as psychological implications of anything
Right.
genetics. And so
Right.
that was just the first bucket.
That sounds really, really interesting. I mean, I actually, I mean, and this isn't something that I think I ought to be proud of, but I didn't know genetic counseling had sort of, really taken root here.
Yeah.
I do, you know,
It's not
so
something that is hugely present as a profession, actually.
so it's a little bit like I think what we do at Manav as well, where psychosocial rehabilitation is something again that's not very common. I think we're one of
Yeah.
very, very few organizations, if at all
Yeah.
any, who are,
How did you get started with Manav? I mean, of course, I know your interests and expertise in psychology, but when did Manav
so
happen
you
for you?
so you know that we had the rehabilitation center at Samaritans, right? So
Yes.
that's where my long and enduring relationship with mental health really began. And after I left Samaritans, I did a little bit of sort of freelance work, dabbled in different, developmental sectors. And one of the consultancies I took up was for a new organization called the Manav Foundation.
Okay.
And they were looking to start a rehabilitation center for people, for adults essentially, who are living with mental illness, recovering from mental illness. So you see a lot of stuff that is available. Not more now, I wouldn't say enough, but still a lot more
Yes,
for
I get it.
kids and younger people. However, adults do tend to sort of get lost,
Yeah,
in when you're doing a
because
needs
they are stuck with
assessment.
the burden of being a responsible adult. No, it's
Because
just,
you're an adult,
yeah,
right? So I mean, you shouldn't need help. You should
yeah,
basically be sorted.
yeah, I get it.
Um, so that started off in. So I started with them as a consultant, so to speak, in 2004,
Okay.
and then joined them as the director in 2005. Because then I sort of realized that this was really where my heart lay. And mental health was really something that I felt very strongly about. So think it was a really good sort of merging of um, you know minds.
Yeah,
And
totally.
I yes, I've been with them right from inception, right from
Conception.
word go. Yeah. And yeah, so here we are.
That's really cool. And so that has been a while too now, since 2004, 2005. So it is also, wow, so cool. So cool. It's very interesting. So
Cross
that's also when I
decade.
started with my genetic counseling journey. And it sounds like your Mana Foundation stuff happened about the
Oh,
same.
so you've been doing this since 2005 as well.
2005 is when I started school for genetic counseling.
Right. So you started, yeah. So your journey began back then.
Yes, absolutely. And like you probably know this, that this is just the formal official on paper journey. Some of these journeys go
Oh,
from
absolutely.
before.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's been quite a interesting sort of ride since then.
Yeah.
Our strongest suit has been our team. Of course, the team has changed. People have worked with us, have left, new people have come
Sure.
in.
Sure.
But I think it's the essence of the team that sort of
Yeah.
stayed. It's basically how the whoever's been part of the team, it's been a team that sort of hung together and been, I think, doing great work, really
No,
good
that is
work.
really cool. And I think at this point, sorry to interrupt you, for people who might be watching and who have no clue, because I know what the Mana Foundation does, and you alluded to this a little
Yes,
bit. Can you talk a little bit
yes.
more about the Mana Foundation?
Our prime focus is really on providing a non-clinical component of treatment for people living with mental illnesses. Now, when I say mental illnesses, I'm talking about severe illnesses like schizophrenia, bipolar disorders, acute depressions, endogenous depressions. These are situations that we work with, are the situations in which people haven't, because of their illness and also sometimes because of very, very severe clinical interventions, aren't able to really function on a day to day basis.
Mhm.
And just like, when you've broken something, an arm or a leg, or, or your body's not working all right, if your heart's not working all right, or if you have diabetes, whatever it is, um, there is a non-clinical component to getting back on your feet. And this
Absolutely.
non-clinical component is something that's just was never acknowledged
Wow.
where mental illness was concerned. So, first
I
of all,
love the
mental illness was
analogy.
not,
Sorry, go on.
yeah. Well, it is, but it's. I just find it so true. I just
Yeah.
find that it really hits the nail on the head because, you um, have the focus on, like, for example, if you have a cardiovascular issue, everyone's talking about, you have to do cardiovascular rehabilitation, you have to make sure your heart's getting back to shape, go for
Yeah.
those walks, eat right.
It's
The
true.
same for, diabetes, the same for a broken leg.
Correct.
I mean, you have to go to do physiotherapy,
Yeah.
whatever it is. And first of all, mental illness was not something that is acknowledged as
Isn't
an
that
illness.
isn't that so cool though that for now, like in 15 years, to see how much it may be slightly oversimplistic, the discussion, but at least
Yeah.
it is not, swept under the rug. It's so
Absolutely,
fantastic.
absolutely. So that witnessed that sort of transition where
Yeah.
mental illness is now at least a part of some social conversations, but
Correct.
definitely we have a whole long, long, long way to go.
Of course.
Um, there is I think there's a lot more talk and there's a lot more within our social fabric where mental health is concerned, and
Mhm.
we're looking at a slight distinction here. So we're
Yeah.
looking at mental health as mental health issues that people are facing more so today. You
Mhm.
know, uh, Issues related to the stress of what's going on, issues related to anxiety, depression. These are issues that definitely need attention, that definitely need to be, recognized as issues, but they aren't the same as the mental illnesses that I'm referring to.
I
Because the
hear this
mental,
now. I hear this
yeah,
from you when you make
yeah,
that distinction. So I have to admit that in my head, mental health is kind of course, it's all encompassing, in my head. But now
it
that you have
is.
said this,
It
it's
is.
a
It
cool
is. But
distinction to make, though. These are two separate
yes,
entities
yes,
apart.
yes, absolutely. So what you're hearing more about right now is, a sort of compromised capacity to deal with one's changing environment.
Mhm.
So you're
Like,
talking about providing support and assistance that people need to cope with what's changing in their environment.
yeah.
What we are doing at Manav Foundation is different in the sense that we're talking about people, regardless of their environment, um, are not able to function, in society, not able to function as people, mainly because of a biochemical disorder. So this is a physiological illness we're talking about. It's not
Yes.
the result of trauma or something that's, happening in your life right now.
Yeah.
It's not transient. It's there to stay. It's a biochemical disorder. Your, you know, Everything, your neurotransmitters, your chemicals, whatever you want to call it, is out of
Okay.
whack. And
Yes.
yes, you do need medication to bring that back into,
I like
balance.
that you try to sound non-clinical by saying things like out of whack. I'm sorry, you're still a professional. No matter whatever cool lingo you want to throw in there.
No, it's just, I just feel like, frankly speaking, it's
I'm
it's the way
teasing.
I look at it and the way I see it.
Yes, of
So
course. No, you have to bring the person Binaifer into this as well. I get this. I get it.
Exactly. So this is Binaifer talking. This is not
Yeah.
the director of Mana Foundation talking. Yeah.
No, but that is
So
really cool, and I really like that you use regular kind of language as well. Because sometimes, and this is my opinion only. I feel like the conversations, surrounding mental health and mental illness are so clinical and sterile that it is almost scary. It is like because I see this oftentimes with physical illnesses as well. Like if you went to
yeah.
I too love using heart disease, diabetes as analogies because it's
Right.
easy to understand. So, like, imagine
I
going to a
yeah.
doctor and saying you have a 80% blockage in your left ascending aorta because of which you suffered a myocardial infarction. And this like it's English, but
Right.
it makes no sense to someone who's
It
not
might as
trained.
well not be. Yeah. Yeah. No.
And I think this is the kinds
I
of
get it.
conversation that
Yeah.
currently sometimes
Yeah.
can be intimidating. So out of whack is appropriate, and it is not disrespectful because that is, in a sense,
Oh
what is
no,
going
it's
on.
definitely not. It's just basically the truth. It
Yeah.
is that your chemicals are out of balance, and there's nothing you can do about it. You haven't asked for that, so it's the same thing. It's like it's your insulin levels are out of whack. Therefore you have diabetes. Or your heart's not beating right. So you have
No, your heart's
whatever.
out of
So
whack.
your heart's out of whack, right? Your heart's been whacked.
Oh
So
no.
whatever. Yeah,
Correct.
so many
Correct.
different ways to spin the analogy, but what I
Of
mean
course.
is that so and what you see is really just the manifestation of that imbalance. So the illness, the symptoms of the illness
Yeah.
leave a person unable to sort of really
Function.
function, and therefore the the psychological aspect, your social aspect, all
Yes.
of this gets severely affected. And then when there is that additional stigma or that additional hesitance for whatever reason,
Like whore.
um, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like I see that. I do see that that's reducing even for
Mm-hmm.
severe illnesses like
Yeah.
schizophrenia. I do feel that people are more open to treatment. You can't have people who've been ill for years, who've really lost lost connection with whatever they were doing when the illness sort of you know made itself felt, so to speak. So there are
Right.
people who were in college, people who were still perhaps in high school, people who had, finished their MBBS, the people who were in, solid careers,
Of course.
captains on ships and doctors, and it's hit them, and then you've gone through this huge period of basically of real isolation away from all of it. Yes, you do take medication, but you've lost a lot of skills, you've lost a lot of abilities that you had once upon a time. So, sort of bringing the person back in touch with that,
Yeah.
even decision making, determining for oneself what one wants to do with oneself, that's as basic,
Absolutely.
and as fundamental, I would say,
Almost autonomy.
process.
Mm.
Yeah, which so or you're mentally ill, you don't know what you're talking about. So if I say sit, you sit. If I say stand, you stand. If I say jump, you jump,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you can't think for yourself. So
Yeah.
bringing that back into within, recapacitating, I
Nice.
would say.
So this is very interesting to me, and I'm wanting to check in with you for my own benefit as well as for anyone who's probably watching this. It seems like to me, from what you're saying, is so I instantly draw parallels to what sounds to me like disability. Do you feel like it
It
would be
is.
fair to call this a disability?
It is a disability, but it's a psychosocial disability.
Correct, but
You
disability
see,
nonetheless. All right.
yes, because the illness itself and the symptoms of the illness render you unable or disabled
Correct.
in a social sense and in a psychological sense.
Yeah.
So your perception, your ability to think, your ability to perceive things, your ability to function, to interact socially, to even stick to the simplest of routines, it's all compromised. And all
Yeah.
of this, affects you and disables you
Yeah.
socially, disables you psychologically. And thereby, I do agree with it being a disability. Not, and it's the illness that renders you as you know, in that sense. It's not a big part of rehabilitation is recognizing that you're not your illness. That
I
your
can
illness is
only
a
imagine.
part of you.
Yeah.
You're much more than that, and
Yeah. Wow.
so let's get out of this world that's limited you, and let's look at
Yeah.
what's beyond your illness. That is you. So
Yeah. I have to admit that I wasn't fully aware and even like cognizant of the distinction really between
yeah,
um, what you're pointing out as mental illness is separate from what is now pop culture mental health. Just
yes,
girl,
yes,
self care
absolutely.
hashtag, self care Sunday and all of that stuff.
Which
Um,
something I think the coronavirus has really boosted, because it really has affected the radical changes that have been brought about, been forced into people's lives, literally, has affected people's mental health. So it's boosted that aspect of mental well-being and health, but it's even further marginalized, I would say, people living with mental illnesses.
Right.
It's
And I hear you, and I also hear you very purposefully listed out examples of people who may have had, for example, schizophrenia is the condition you were specifically alluding to. So you named doctors, you named teachers, you named college students, medical students, captains, and whatnot. So are you trying to
yes,
say that mental illness can happen to anyone?
sure. Absolutely, for sure. It is for everyone, and I think that's part and parcel of understanding that human nature is very much like, whether you're talking about corona, whether you're talking about a mental illness, whether you're talking about being caught in an earthquake. Human nature is, this is not going to happen to me. It's happening to somebody else. Not me.
Yeah.
And these are conditions that sort of, you know, force you into a reality check and say, yes, you too. It can really just be it's anyone. And there's no, of course, there are certain predisposing sort of, conditions. Like, for example, hereditary factors do play a role. So if there has been mental illness in your family, just like I would say cancer, there are certain cancers that are one would be more vulnerable to, or more predisposed to, if there was a genetic history
Family
there.
history of it. And
Yeah,
I hear you.
yeah,
I hear what you're saying. I think a good example of that is probably like everyone has heard of Angelina Jolie and her family history of the breast and ovarian cancer, and that led her to do genetic testing, and she figured
right,
out what felt most comfortable for her as a way to
right,
manage her risks, regardless of whatever the fuck other people opined about that. Finally
exactly,
do
yeah,
what you think is best for yourself. But I do feel like over here with mental illness, um, and you should I would love to hear your thoughts on this, is that I feel like it's slightly different from cancer because I think that I wonder, actually, I don't think I'm wondering if with mental illness, if you were raised in a family that had mental illness, there is a hereditary component, sure, because DNA. I'm wondering if there's also a conditioning and early life experiences, because a parent may have been too unwell to model or to provide care in a way that is necessary for a child to actually grow up healthy,
hmm,
psychologically speaking. So
hmm,
I feel like
hmm,
that kind of distinguishes mental illness from something like cancer, where it doesn't matter
hmm,
if you had a parent that was negligent or abusive, even, but your DNA is
hmm.
unchanging. But I feel like with mental illness, there is such an equal part to not just DNA, but also the environment that you grow up in, also the kind of coping strategies that we might learn just from what is modeled to us, by our parents.
I'm thinking whilst you're, because no one's ever asked me this question before, so I'm thinking, and I think that you're right. I think, um, however, I think both illnesses are, although differently debilitating, they're
Yeah.
both very debilitating. So,
Yes.
for example, a household or a parent that is living with cancer, I do know of situations where, again, the nurture
Yeah.
component has taken a big hit, because
Sure.
even though there have been periods of remission, the
Mhm.
overall quality and amount
Comes
of time
down.
spent in one's own treatment and care does take away from what one can contribute to one's childhood.
Correct, correct. But
Um,
that in turn does not increase the child's risk for cancer specifically.
no, definitely not. But not even for mental illness. So
Okay.
there's nothing infectious about mental illness, in
But
even in the vaguest sense.
yeah, that
You
wasn't
would
what I was
have,
suggesting either.
right. No, no, I understand what you're saying. I'm using that word very, very sort of, loosely. And I mean
I
that you
think
can't,
just
it's not, you might, I feel, again, here I'm thinking out loud, you might, because you've been deprived of a certain amount of attention or quality of attention, and have been exposed perhaps uh, different different patterns of behavior, some that could be destructive. I think you might have that sort of, you know you might grow up with some sort of tendency to develop, perhaps, maybe self-destructive patterns of behavior, perhaps. Or you
potentially.
might actually sort of, be also, could go a different way. And actually, I've seen this is where you're expected to grow up so quickly,
Mhm.
because there's so much growing up that you do independently when you have an absent parent, whether it's absence because of illness, and especially when you see a parent um, whose behavior doesn't make sense to you.
Right.
Self-preservation is an extremely sort of, wondrous sort of, um,
Instinctual.
it kicks in, and you sort of, you realize that, okay, I'm going to have to figure this out on my own.
Yeah.
And very often you sort of grow up before you really need to, you know,
It's true.
ahead of your years, and you become a carer, you become a caregiver. You start taking care of other family members, you start taking care of the sick parent, you start becoming, you know, more and more independent, and as well as more depended upon. So it could, I think, go, either way. You could actually sort of, it's a vague sort of comparison to fight or flight. So you either stay to sort of do what you can to keep the boat from, sinking, or you sort of take off in a different way, and you cope by emulating some of the behaviors, or by being self-destructive yourself. So I think it could go,
I just feel like
either
that.
way.
Thank you for responding to my slightly vague question, but in my head, for me, it definitely adds such an invisible almost layer to mental illness. And I feel like this is not something that a lot of people may even consider, that it is just even the environment that you grow up in, whether it is from DNA, or whether it is just the quality you were talking about of parenting that someone is able to offer. Not
Right.
because they're horrible people, it's truly because they may be suffering in in the first place.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
They're
it
doing the only thing they know
compounds
how to do. Yeah.
risks.
Yeah. No, I think it was an extremely, well, it's a thought provoking question. Like I said, this is the first time I'm actually thinking about how, you know, a child growing up with a parent who has cancer, how that would affect the growing up, and how a child growing up with mental illness, how that would affect a child. So, yeah, it's,
Only because it's easy to draw those comparisons with physical illness and mental illness for the sake of helping someone understand, because we live in such a physical
world.
framework, almost.
You're
It's a
right.
little hard to
Right.
deconstruct. A whole different framework exists, and I don't know if it's a whole different framework, but maybe the framework ought to be more inclusive, perhaps, of other parts of who we are as human
I think
beings.
it's the invisible framework, and because it's invisible, it's easy to ignore,
Yeah,
and it it's a framework that you can't ignore only if it sort of blows up in your face,
correct.
but otherwise it's something that's, because its invisibility is makes it so easy to sort of brush it aside or not look at it.
And I think this is largely why mental illness is so unspoken of, or grief or sadness or even the littler things. I think
Yeah.
perhaps our emotional vocabulary as human beings, and then the language then that is necessary to be able to communicate that to someone. So if I've gone and smacked my head somewhere, is bleeding, obviously you can see it. I'm feeling a
Yes.
little, even not even really sad, but what is the word to describe this to somebody? And
Yes.
what are the odds that someone that I explain this to will either not blow it out of proportion or be dismissive, or
Dismissive. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, or just reassure me for no reason, or just give me a good
and
pep
that's
talk.
and that's and that's perhaps because they can't see it. So
Yeah,
the point is that I can see the bump on your head and I can see that it's really bad and you need stitches, or it's okay, just put some ice on it and you'll be fine. That's because I
yeah,
can see it, but I can't
correct.
see what's going on inside you. I can't see how sad you are. I can't see how angry you are. I can't see what's going on. And but you're right. There's also this, I feel and I have felt that another reason that mental illness has a you know always had a bad rap is because it's something that we've been conditioned to fear. When you talk about mental illness, especially, maybe not so much anymore, but until maybe recently, maybe 10 years ago, 5, 10 years ago, the way in which mental illness is portrayed, not just in movies and films, but even in conversations, like schizophrenia, and you say that with those big eyes, like, oh my,
Yeah,
beware, that sort of thing, or
yeah, it's true.
bipolar, or there's that unknown sort of,
I
and what
think
we
all
don't
the
know.
fears also. No, he or she is so bipolar, or he or she is so schizophrenic. It's like, how is this?
Yes, yes,
How is this
yes,
okay even?
yeah. And they're all based on complete misconceptions and a lack of actual understanding of what it means to be schizophrenic or what it means to be bipolar. But yeah, they're almost used as derogatory terms, as in a way when you
Yes.
want to be derogatory and you want to put someone down. They're not recognized as illnesses. They recognized, that seen as these ominous, sort of
Absolutely.
phenomenon that we
More to
don't
you
know about. So therefore, one must be afraid of it.
correct.
And fear is something that keeps people from engaging with mental illness.
Absolutely.
And I
Absolutely.
think if we are able to say, no, you know, there is really nothing to be afraid of. I mean, especially when people talk about, oh, but we know people with mental illness tend to get aggressive and tend to get violent. But if you look at the numbers, a lot of violent crimes, many more violent crimes are committed by people with no history of mental illness, as opposed to any sort of violence that you would see because of mental illness.
Absolutely. There is room for nuance in this conversation and in this understanding. It's like saying, oh, the all dolphins are fish, but all fish aren't dolphins. To go back to to go back to something like that and to have this discussion is
Yeah,
just really really important. And also, I was just thinking right now is that it's very interesting that you're talking about how fear can keep you from talking about stuff, because it means that
yeah,
you're not coping with your fear in a way that
right.
it addressing the fear. So I find it very interesting, when people are afraid to talk about something, to get them to talk about stuff. I feel a little conflicted sometimes, because it's sometimes it is also protective, not to not want to talk about something that is too scary. I think we denial can be very protective too sometimes, but then it can become problematic if we start concocting these fantastical stories and all of that. So, because you're the expert, what would be a good way to balance that out? Because people are afraid, and fear largely comes from ignorance. You're right, but uh, how do we acknowledge people's fear in a real way, and also slowly start to desensitize, almost like systematically?
So you're talking about specifically fear of mental illness, right? That's what you're specifically talking. I think just like many of our emotions that are a big part of our everyday operating system, fear is yet another one that we don't acknowledge. It's something, I think there is a I say this, as a blanket statement, but I do feel that more or less, I think we function without actually being in touch with our emotions, being aware of them, understanding them, knowing that, they're there,
Yeah,
whatever they may be. And we base a lot of our decisions, and our decisions basically give rise to a lot of our behaviors. Even if these decisions are, made on a subconscious level or on a conscious level, that's what gives rise to how you behave and how you engage with your world. And I think getting in touch with your emotions and getting in touch with your fear, and I don't mean getting in touch with it in a sort of la-ti-da way. I mean just understanding your fear. Is that first you have to acknowledge that yes, this is something that I'm scared of, and the reason I don't want to engage with so and so is because I think there might be something wrong mentally, and I'm scared. you know so you have to acknowledge that you're scared. You have to acknowledge that there's this fear that's giving rise to this decision, and therefore
and are
you're
you
staying
also
away from this
suggesting
thing.
that it is okay to be scared, Binaifer?
Damn, got me there. I was trying to sort of just slip that in, but yeah, so you need to sort of you need to make your peace with that. And then and that is why I feel that we need to address fear first
Yeah,
as an emotion, and then you sort of try and, of course, then you look at emotion, and then you have to look at the flip side of emotion, which is rational,
yeah,
and you rationalize what it is. That's You don't rationalize your fear away. That's
I
not going
get
to
it.
help. That's not going
Yes,
to happen. But what I mean is, you're able to use your rationale to understand your fear, and then perhaps understand the fact that there's no need for that fear,
correct, correct.
and that
No, I think
it's
this
just
is great.
something that you don't have information about. And so I
If
don't
I
know if
would
that answered your question, though. Did it?
No, that does. It was not so much of a question as much as I really want to hear what your thoughts are about this. And from what you're saying to me, it sounds like perhaps what we should be putting out there more is that, you know what, it's okay to be afraid, and that is fine too. Um, because a lot of times we may be convinced in our own heads, or people may have convinced us that we have to always be strong and brave and fearless, and it's just too much pressure, I think, to be like on all the time. And it's okay to feel afraid. And sometimes I don't even know if it seems like you have hung. Hey. Hey, Ma, the phone was on Do Not Disturb, so I missed your message, but I saw it now. We're back. You're muted.
Now you can hear me.
Yes, I can. I'm still laughing at your message.
What?
So we just got disconnected. You guys, we got disconnected and we've gotten reconnected. And sent me a message that says, "Connection, take BG a walk."
Connection taking a walk is what it was meant to be.
Like autocorrect is so mad, man. I once messaged my work colleague saying that, I need to have quick convo about like just some stuff. You're free to speak for 10 minutes. That speak has gotten corrected to soak. And he's like, with you? Sure. I'm like, why is this happening to me? God. No, but we were talking about how I thought you asked me if that answered your question. And I think it's just a conversation and very important to exchange thoughts and just views and just to have this discussion. I was not really looking for a particular answer, but this was really helpful to hear your thoughts. And I actually, it's so cool what you're saying that, and this is why I was like, so are you saying that it is okay to be afraid? Because I think it is. But most people, and this is again my opinion only, I feel that people are actually afraid of being afraid. And that's what makes it really tough to deal with it. So if you're feeling fear about mental, illness or about mental health or about the coronavirus or anything, about where is your job going, where's this relationship going, like when am I going to get to the dishes in the sink, which is my fear. This is the truth.
I relate. I can relate.
No, but I think it's really cool to put it out there that fear is also an emotion. And you were saying that once you're able to...
the thing is, just like any emotion, you're going to feel it.
Yeah.
There is, you're not, if you're a human being, you're not going to escape fear. You're not going to escape anger. You're not going to escape happiness. You're not going to escape sadness. You're going to feel it all at some point or the other. Yeah. So, you might as well sort of accept that that's going to happen, and get on with it, as opposed to, denying that, you ever feel X, Y, or Z. Because if you're human, you will feel. Whether you're aware that you're feeling or you're not aware that you're feeling, that's a different...
Right.
That's different.
No, it's absolutely right. And that's a good thing to, like, I feel like drill into people's heads is that, like if you're a human being, then happiness, sadness, anger, joy,
fear, guilt, frustration, all of it. Yeah.
Part of the human experience, you will experience it, and to be able to like just recognize, is what you were saying earlier.
And I'm this whole thing of, deal with it is secondary. There are some who need help to deal with it, and there's some who can just deal with it, and some who, will just refuse to deal with it no matter what you do. That's your prerogative. That's up to you. You want to sort of deal with it, you don't want to deal with it. But the point is that you're making even that choice. But you can only make that choice if you're going to stop denying that you are going to feel what you're feeling. So if you stop denying it and you say, okay, this is what I'm feeling, but I don't want to deal with it, that's fine. That's your choice.
This is very, very cool distinction. So if you're feeling something and if you don't feel like doing something about it, that is fine. But recognize that you're feeling it and you can just let that be. Just let it sit there, like the dishes in the sink.
Exactly.
You don't want to deal with it, but they are there. And they will be
I'll
there.
get to it when I get to it. I'll get to it when I want to. I get to it when I can. I'll get to it when I get to it.
And you know
Simple as
what?
that.
If I need help, I will hire help. And if I can't deal with my emotions, then perhaps I need to speak with someone who can help out,
Correct.
someone who is an
Correct.
expert at that. And that might be a good place to start, because it's also not possible for us to be able to deal with everything as human beings. I
Of
think some
course.
of us are naturally good at some things, some of us are naturally good at other things. You
Absolutely.
ask me to do, I don't know, like complicated like integrations and derivatives, and I'm happy to say I don't know squat about this, and that doesn't mean that I suddenly am now thinking, oh, am I not an intelligent person? Am I completely useless?
Not
No.
good enough. Yeah.
To
Yeah.
recognize that just because you need help doesn't mean like you're some kind of a ginormous loser that is completely incompetent, and if you're feeling afraid,
I
that
think
means
it takes actually a lot to sort of acknowledge that you need help, to say that I don't know how to do this, whatever this might be. It's a huge step for a lot of people, to sort of, that's what I'm talking about. The whole denial is that I can do it. I don't need help, or this is not an issue for me. That sort of denial is where I think, the first barrier is. You overcome the barrier of denial, then you have a plethora of choices in terms of how you want to go about it. Whether you want to just let it be, whether you want to do something about it, whether you want to ask for help, whether you want to, get on your own, whatever. You know?
no, this is really, really cool. This is really, really cool. It's awesome. And I love having this conversation with you, Binaifer, because I feel like so many people are possibly have to benefit from just knowing that, like today, if someone is here, if you're here watching this and this conversation about mental illness freaks you the fuck out, it's okay to be freaked the fuck out. Yeah, you don't have to do anything about it. You just have to know
Yeah,
that this is okay. Whatever you're feeling right now, this whole conversation, if it has made you feel like fuck, it's okay.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I guess everyone's going to react to it. Whoever watches this, going to react to it as they do, and that's what it is. We, yeah.
Yeah,
So
awesome.
yeah.
Time for us
So
to play a game now. I think we've come to that place
ah,
where like we've wrapped this up nicely, and
okay.
this has
Game
been
time.
good. What?
It's a game time.
Yes, it is game time, because there has been a shift in how we feel about the discussion we have had. This has been great conversation, but now it is game time, because it's what we do, because we have to have a really good time. And good time is not always just having fun and games. Good time is also having completely cool conversation, but we're going to play games too, because why not? So the game
Okay.
that I'm playing with you today is called ABC. Have you ever heard about this game?
No.
Okay, so it's an improv game that I learned from my comedy life, doing some improv stuff. It's when two
Right.
characters, and we could play ourselves or you could take on a character or whatever, but we basically have communication, right? In communication, for those of you who are unaware, is exchange of thoughts and feelings in by using words to do that. So the way ABC works is that if I start a sentence, if I start conversation with a sentence that begins with A, I say, "Are, I can't believe that the fucking
Yeah.
construction noises are ruining this thing, this conversation." And then you say,
Okay.
"Hey, all right, I can't even hear it."
Ah,
And I
A,
say,
B,
"Can't
C.
even
So we
hear
go in
it?
that order.
Can't even hear it." Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
are you ready for
Let's
ABC?
go.
ABC dance first. It's ABC. ABC, ABC. ABC. You don't have to feel compelled to join me at all. This is just me.
I
All
am
right.
not. I'm going, that's all you.
Free will is amazing. You don't have to do what someone else is doing if it doesn't make sense to you. Correct.
Absolutely. I live
I can
by
be
that.
respectful of your choices and still love you, even though you have not joined me in the ABC dance. But let's play the ABC dance.
Let's
So
play.
All right. Do you want to start or do you want me to start the first sentence?
You start.
All right. I'm going to go and I'm going to begin with the letter B because Binaifer, this is what your name begins with. So we're going to start with B. Binaifer, this is so cool to have this convo with you.
Cool. That's what it is. Cool.
Damn right, girl.
Yee. Okay, you got me there. End. We're coming to the end of this conversation by any chance?
Fair. I think it perhaps is the end of this conversation, but I think it has been so cool to be able to have this chat with you.
No, it has been. It's been a lot
You
of fun.
continue with G. Binaifer, we're still playing.
Oh, we're still playing. Uh, Great. It's been great. This conversation's been really great. Hey, no, we skipped F. F comes before G.
I said fair. It is the end. When you said end.
Right.
But
Okay.
perhaps this game is not so important, like forget all of this stuff. But really, thank you so much for doing this. I think it's really important.
No, not at all. Thank you so much. Really, I mean, I really feel like this has been a wonderful opportunity, to talk about mental illness and talk about what's really important to me. And I really thank you for giving me this opportunity and also just for creating this space for these conversations that don't happen very often. You're inviting into it, things that I think lots of spaces sort of are closed to. So I really, truly appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Those are very, very kind words, and I really
But they're
appreciate.
true. They're true.
Thank you.
They're not just empty words. They're true.
Yes, of course. I understand this. Thank you. Thank you for showing us that mental illness is potentially can be a disability that can actually come in the way of someone's functioning, and how rehab, just as it is relevant for physical illnesses, is important for mental illnesses as well. Thanks for explaining how sometimes you might feel the good feelings and the crap feelings, and these are all feelings, and
Not
they are
so
all
good feelings. Exactly. And they're going to come and go.
correct. Absolutely. And if people want to find Manav Foundation, is there a website? Is there an Instagram handle? Okay. Okay, we're back. We're back. You're muted, but we're back.
Yeah, we really should have like a choreographed song and dance to be back.
We must.
All these unscheduled, unplanned breaks that we're forced to take because of our wonderful connections.
I know, but also great conversation to have because of our wonderful connection. And I really was saying thank you earlier on, and I have to say thank you and I was also wanting to kind of summarize all the cool stuff that you talked about that I feel is so important. To say that how mental illness can be as disabling as a physical illness, but in slightly more nuanced ways that are perhaps specific to mental illnesses that need to be seen and acknowledged as being their own thing. So while it's great to make comparisons between physical and mental illnesses, there will be stuff that is truly only true for mental illnesses, and making the comparison
unique,
to physical illnesses is a great kind of introduction to the concept of it. But we need to know that there is more, and rehabilitation is extremely important so that people can start to at least find their way around functioning again because
Right.
so much,
Right.
I think we can all take a beating when we're ill, and this is true when
Right.
we're mentally ill as well. So rehab and
Yeah.
recovery is important. This is what Manav Foundation does. Where can people find Manav Foundation? Do you have an Insta page? Do you have a website?
We have a website, so it's www.manafoundation.org.in. So
.org.in.
definitely, yeah,
Oh, this
yeah.
is like new. I've never heard that kind of an. All right. So now
No,
we know it is.
dot in. Yeah, it has the dot in at the end, and yeah. So look us up. Definitely,
Wait.
I think you'd
Mana
find the website
Foundation
interesting.
org.in, not Mana Foundation .org.in.
Manafoundation.org.in.
Okay, so I did
Dots.
hear it right the first time. All right. In case
Yes,
you were as
yes.
confused as I was, it is two dots. This is how the website works. All right.
Two dots. Yes, this is how it works, and this
And
is
thank
where
you
we're at,
also for
where you'd
explaining,
find us.
Binaifer, to us all that it's okay to feel afraid, whether it is of mental illnesses or dishes. I will keep going back to that because this is the closest to me right now. But and we might
Yeah,
choose to do something about it. We might not choose to do something about it. But I think what was really beautiful about what you have just explained is that if you're human, you will likely experience everything, and it's important to be aware of that and to not be
right,
afraid, feeling afraid, because that can keep you from actually just seeing it as just another.
right.
And
And if you are afraid, I mean, wake up to that.
mhm,
That's what I'm saying. You know,
yeah,
I mean, wake up to being afraid of whatever it is that you're
yeah.
afraid of.
No, that's really cool too. Thank you so much. This has
Mm.
been
No,
really,
not
really
at
cool.
all, Pooja. Really, it's been, like I said, it's been a lot of fun. Um, I'm really glad that I think our wavelengths met. Also, I think we're both sort of in tune, given that our chosen professions are, you know, in the same sort of
Yeah.
part of the same pool. And so it's always, I think it's enriching in the sense that every time you have a conversation, even if it's something that you've said before, there's always something for me to learn from the conversation. So, every conversation is
For me.
new is new in its and unique in its own learning and its own. So, thank you for all of that. And like I said before, thank you for, creating this space for all this, that invites in such important conversations.
You are very
Yeah.
welcome. Thank you for giving me the best time.
And the game, I'm going
And
to
the
just
game.
just leave that out there, sidestep that whole game thing.
We don't want to deal with the game. It's okay. We don't have to.
Nah. I'm Binaifer Jesia, and I have had the best time ever.
Woohoo! Yeah. So
That did it.
you don't have to join me, but I am really pleased. All
All
right,
right.
ladies and gents, and everyone else who believes binary is bullshit. Binaifer Jesia. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, Pooja, you take care and have a great week.
Will do. You do too. Ta-ta.
I will try. See you. You overcome the barrier of denial, then you have a plethora of choices in terms of how you want to go about it. Whether you want to just let it be, whether you want to do something about it, whether you want to ask for help, whether you want to, get on your own, whatever.
That was Binaifer Jesia, you guys, director of Mana Foundation, and you can reach Mana Foundation at www.manafoundation.org.in. We know this now, and I really hope that you enjoyed this video. And if you did, then you should definitely like, comment, share, and subscribe so that I can see you the next time, and we can continue to have the best time ever. Bye.